Hi everybody, this is April Rashat with TLS Weight Loss Solution, and today in this webinar we're talking about dealing with detours and eating out. But remember, these webinars have been designed as an adjunct to the incredible tools that are available through the TLS system. So they are intended to provide extra support and guidance, but not intended to replace the critical tools and resources available through the TLS system. And of course, if you go to www.tlsslim.com, there's a ton of resources, videos, articles, ways to journal online. There's an app to journal online, and it gets better and better every day. So be sure that you're using those. These are just a way for your coach to be able to help you from a remote situation to learn the TLS system and some of the nuances and things that we've learned along the way. So again, the health guide that you see on the left-hand side there is a great guide that has a ton of information for you to be reading on an ongoing basis so that you really do start to understand the science behind what TLS is about, and then also be able to have a place to journal. And today, there's even a better resource in the TLS guide in the end, which is an eating out guide, and that's a little bit of what we're talking about in our topic today. But be sure to hit tlsslim.com. Just please make sure you are already logged in, and you should be already, as a preferred customer with your coach before you do log in to tlsslim.com or purchase an ongoing subscription either by the month or 3-month or a year. So staying on course means that we have to deal with detours that pop up here and there. So before we get started, just a little check-in in terms of how you're doing. One thing that I always like to ask people is whether or not they're journaling in their guide, and remembering that people lose 50% more weight when they are journaling. And this is not only a way for you to be aware of what you're eating and in how much, but also so that your coach might be able to take a look at that and really give you some ideas on what might be hindering any progress that you're trying to make, or things that you're doing really well that you want to make sure that you're repeating. But it's important you know how to check your journal. So if you haven't done that yet with your coach, that may be something you want to check in about. What you're looking for, and it makes it very easy in the guide, is to see, am I getting 8 to 12 servings of vegetables? Am I getting 3 servings of protein? Am I getting 1 to 2 fruits during the day? How's my water doing? My sleep? Am I noticing any patterns or trends? But you want to be able to make sure that you're able to identify what those proteins are. Am I having too many of the starchy vegetables like a sweet potato, so that maybe that's going to hinder your progress? So being able to really take a look at that is important. Be sure also that any of the proteins you utilize that are of a dairy source are also being tracked in the dairy section, because some people have some sensitivities to dairy, and again, just nuances, but being able to identify things that may be slowing down any of your progress would be really important to pick up on, or making sure that all of your protein sources are coming from just that one same source of dairy. The next thing, are you taking your supplements consistently? So whether it's Axe or Core or Thermochrome with Advantrezi, or it's the CLA, you want to make sure you're taking them as directed and that you're taking them on an ongoing basis, because the science shows that they do work and they will accelerate your results, but it's your job to make sure that you're that you're remembering to take them. One great tool that tlsslim.com has is that you can set up email and text messages so that you can alert yourself and remind yourself when it's time to take them. And that's something that I use all the time that really helps me to make sure that I'm consistent. Are you checking in with your coach, and are you watching the short videos on tlsslim.com? They're much shorter than the webinars. Some of them are 5-7 minutes long, and they can be really helpful. There is one that's called Dealing with Detours. They just address some different issues than we are here, so that's a great tool to use. Are you exercising? And I like to make sure that people aren't just being a weekend warrior, where they do nothing all week and then they really hit it hard on the weekend, but even 10 minutes consistently every day. We've got some great PDFs you can download online that will help to walk you through graduated exercise programs, and 10 minutes a day makes a huge difference. You'll feel yourself the next day after following some of these exercises that TLS does have. Are you pre-planning your meals? I find that the best success that I have in moving forward on track is that we do some menu planning, and that I make sure that I sit down with our kids and we cut up veggies to make sure that those are at the ready. We take lettuce and we rip off the big sheets of either the Boston lettuce or even the iceberg, just that we're going to use them for wraps, with turkey and avocado or things like that, so that if you have these things ready in your refrigerator and you've done some pre-planning of your meals, especially if you're going to be in the car traveling or at work a long time, that's going to increase your success. And then really making sure that you know what meals you're enjoying. I like to write down every once in a while. These have been some really great snacks that everybody liked this week, so I'm going to make sure that we repeat that, and maybe kind of go through some sort of a cycle of things that you have in the house this week versus next week. Fruits that, paired really nicely, or dinners that you might have made, or, a sauce that you might have made. Recently it's been spaghetti squash with pesto, and everybody's really enjoying that. In the summer, gazpacho soup, but adding in maybe a little bit of white bean if you wanted to, or if you wanted to eliminate the beans, just putting some shrimp and scallops that you grilled on the grill are a fantastic way to have a nice, cool, summer meal. But you also want to identify areas that you're stumbling, and fumbling. And, is it the late night eating? Do I need to change some of my behaviors or some of my habits, and what am I going to do to get those things in place? So potential detours that we might see, I think always are social situations. We'd like to assume that as adults we're not, going to be exposed to peer pressure, but I think in some very subtle way we are. If your friend is going to have another glass of wine, or is going to indulge in the bread that's on the table while you're eating out, or is hanging out at your house and wants to have some chips and salsa, you're more likely to go there than if you were probably by yourself. So that pressure of just being a part of that social situation can make it really difficult. Eating out at restaurants, or going to parties, or having holidays that you're a part of, you feel somehow that that's like the last time that we're ever going to eat, and so we have this feast, and we feel like we have to just eat everything in that one day. But these are things that are just the way they are, and so they can potentially detour us off track to where our goals are. Eating on the go and having changes to your schedule can also get things to be a little difficult, including vacations. Having stress that comes in either intermittently, or if maybe just at the end of the day you feel stressed out, that kind of thing. Kids and family, and thinking that you have to feed people differently, and even old habits that are dying hard, or food addictions, which we're going to cover that a little bit later when we go into the stress component in a different webinar. But these are things that you want to make sure that you're aware of moving forward. So for eating out, you have to check the guide. You want to make sure that you really know is that most restaurant food is very high in salt, sugar, incredibly large portions. So, fat, salt, and sugar has sort of been latent in every food along the way, even the things that we thought were healthy, the low sugar cereals, or the granola bars, or whatever it might be. And eating out especially, that's why their stuff tastes so different than the stuff that you make that's similar at home. The chicken parm that you make at home, that you bake and whatever, it just tastes different, and that's because you're not seeing all the fat, salt, and sugar that is going into these meals to make them highly palatable for you. But you want to be aware of where you're going ahead of time when you are eating out, and pre-plan the best you can before going out. Two websites I like to use. One is dietfacts.com and the other is calorieking.com. But your restaurant that you go to might actually have its own website, and you can check the nutrition facts that are on there. But if not, you could search for general foods, or you could search for an actual restaurant. I like to use dietfacts.com. I just did it the other day. But before you go to even Panera Bread, or before you go to some other chain restaurant, or even just before you go out for Chinese, I wanted to check a Chinese meal that somebody that I knew was eating, and it wasn't a chain restaurant, but I picked one that was similar. So I just did P.F. Chang's or something, because a lot of the Kung Pao chicken or the General Gao's is generally the same, and you can get an idea of what that looks like. And I wanted to be able to point out how many carbohydrates, fats, salts, in terms of sodium and calories and stuff were in those foods ahead of time. But you would be surprised. A tuna grinder, a foot-long tuna grinder with cheese at Blimpie's is over 2,000 calories, over 75 grams of fat, and almost 100 grams of carbohydrates. And it's like you look at that and you say, my gosh, if I made tuna at home, it wouldn't nearly be what that is. And you're right about that. But when you go to a restaurant and you're thinking tuna, you don't realize that they're using the full-fat mayo and 5 times too much of it. That they're not looking, even though they say it's a whole grain bread, it just sounds good from a marketing perspective, but it still is packed with carbohydrates, that they're adding things that you would never add into the food that you're making at home. Chicken parmesan at a macaroni grill Italian restaurant that I looked up had 90 grams of protein. And now if you think about it, 25 to 30 grams of protein is about the serving size of a piece of chicken. So what is that telling you? In portion size alone, that's about 3 times a normal serving. Where a Greek salad, you think you're going to be healthy, at Panera Bread has 48 grams of fat because of the dressing and 1,560 milligrams of sodium, which is more than half of what a daily, upper limit would be. And then how about a black bean burger? When you think that you're doing something good at Chili's and it doesn't even have a bun, you take the bun off and it still has 96 grams of carbs and almost 2,000 milligrams of sodium. Now, not that there's not a ton of fiber in that that's going to slow that down a little bit, but again, you know, you'd be better off maybe just not having that overload of carbohydrates at that level and just being able to have something else that you could kind of put together, a salad with grilled chicken or salmon with broccoli or something else that, you know, didn't just sound healthy and really wasn't. So here are a few tips for eating out. Eating and drinking a little something before you're going out is always helpful. You never want to go starving, just like you don't want to go grocery shopping starving. So I like to make sure I drink a few glasses of water so I'm hydrated. Maybe I'll even have a little bit of a TLS shake, or I'll have a piece of fruit or something that's just going to get my palate so that I'm not in just that starving mode where my blood sugar is starting to drop. I'm also going to pre-plan or set up rules of maybe what I'm going to eat. If, let's say, I'm going to the Olive Garden, and that's a dangerous place to go. You know, I already know I'm not going to a pasta dish. I usually get salmon and broccoli there, but what's always on the table, those breadsticks. So I'm going to set up a rule, no gluten or no breadsticks or whatever, and I'm only going to have one glass of wine at the end of dinner. So if I pre-plan it and then I stick to it, I can feel really successful about that. And sometimes that can just make you feel good. Likewise, if you're going to cheat on something, if it is the glass of wine or you are going to have one bite of a dessert, set up the rule and follow through with that and feel good about it so you don't torture yourself over it later. Wear your favorite outfit, which sounds silly to say, but really the point is no elastic waisted pants. I know when I put on a pair of snug jeans and I'm going to go out to eat, it's going to be a lot harder for me than if I wore a loose dress that was, you know, really easy on my belly. So I'm very aware when I start to eat that it feels a little bit snug, and that's going to help me to keep on track. Drinking water before the meal. So when you do get there, one thing that I like to do, and it says it even in the next bullet, order veggies or a salad as soon as you sit down, because don't they always bring chips, or they bring bread, or they bring something, popcorn, anything to the table ahead of time. So if I order a little green salad, a little side salad, it's usually $2 or $3, you know, and have some water right at the beginning of the meal, instead of indulging in, let's say, some alcohol or some bread or chips that are on the table, isn't that a better way to start your meal and to make you feel like you're crunching, you're satiated, and it's going to help you to stay away from those other things. So you just skip the bread, chips, or popcorn even before they put it on the table so they don't have to throw it out. Even if the other person is okay with that, just say, could you take this away? Or ask the person you're eating with, you know, how many pieces you're going to have. Just have those amount of pieces on their table and don't leave a huge basket of stuff that's there that's just looking at you. And also wait to order or consume any alcohol until after you've eaten, because the last thing you want to do is just spike your blood sugar right there on an empty stomach when you start your meal, whereas if you time it differently, you have some salad or some protein or whatever, and then you have some sips of some, you know, wine or a vodka drink or whatever it might be, that you do it later, and it's not going to have as much an impact on your blood sugar. Take your supplements. That's a great time before you go out to eat to take that core, which is going to be able to not negate the calories, but definitely limit the spike in your blood sugar from either the portion size or whatever that it is that you're eating, and help your blood sugar to not have as rapid a rise. I like to ask for a to-go container also at the start of the meal, because again, if you know it's going to be a large portion, you could enjoy it the next day, but sometimes if it's on your plate, you feel like you need to eat it. So putting away half of it right away, getting used to the idea that I'm going to be satisfied with half of this meal. You know you can always go back for more, but you know, having more veggies, having more water, if you let yourself just sit there for 20, 30 minutes after you've eaten, you'll realize that you really are full. And then, of course, just avoid the danger zones. The buffets, the all-you-can-eat locations are always bad news because you always want to get your money's worth. What to order? I like to keep it simple. I just started to get more into the idea that I was out to eat with a friend or with my family and be more involved in that social interaction than I was about what it was that I was about to eat. And that was a tough switch for me because I love food. But I found that I can be really happy and really satiated if I can put some things together. I find that even at somewhere like a Pizzeria Uno, I can create a salad that's so beautiful I feel like they should have it on their menu. And so maybe I'll stick with something like a lean or plain protein. I was just talking about an example of Olive Garden that they have a salmon there, and then they have some really nice steamed broccoli, and I get double veggies, and that way I know I'm going to feel really good. They put lemon on it, and I will just squeeze the lemon all over that, and you know, I feel really satisfied with that. Remember that half of your plate is veggies. Keep sauces on the side or order things without a dressing. You can dip your fork into a dressing even with like a salad, or you can just keep it on the side so that you can determine how much to use. Another thing you can do is if you wanted some kind of a dressing, but then you can just ask for plain vinegar. Whether it's an Italian dressing or a creamy dressing, you can cut, you know, by putting in some vinegar along with it to make it go a lot further and not have to use as much. And then maybe something is always going to come with some kind of a starch, right? So it's probably going to be a bad carbohydrate according to the glycemic index. So maybe they have black bean salsa on the menu, or they have sweet potato on the menu, and maybe you can just substitute it, or you can just skip the carb altogether and just go with the double veggies. Another example, as I was saying at Pizzeria Uno, is I'll say, you know what, I just want a big salad that has a lot of mixed greens in it, and I'd like these vegetables, you know, and I would like a little bit of bacon on it, and I'd like some grilled chicken and shrimp, and I'd like some slices of avocado. And I'll have some olive oil and vinegar on the side, or I'll have this dressing on the side, or whatever, and I've made a salad that doesn't have the candied walnuts and doesn't have this, and that, you know, so I can decide what I'm putting on there because of what I see that they have on the menu. But you do want to avoid words like buttery, sautéed, pan-fried, au gratin, thermidor, Newburgh, Parmesan, cheese sauce, scalloped, à la mode, or au fromage, because obviously all of those are going to be packing in the salt, fat, and sugar. Parties and holidays can get you off track, and again, I think it's just important to have your goals in the forefront, you know, so that just going to a social event like that doesn't completely throw you off track, and remembering that this is just food, and it's not worth it, you know, to just throw everything down the toilet just because of one party that you have when you have these goals that are so important to you and will make you feel so good when you can demonstrate some control. So creating some strategies might be a good way to go, and enlisting the support of a host or a hostess. So if it is a friend and maybe they don't follow TLS, but you just tell them, listen, I'm working so hard, I have this goal I'm trying to hit by such and such a day, people will appreciate that. So just say, I hope it's okay, can I just bring some food? I'll happy to share it with everybody, you know, but I just want to make sure that I have stuff that I can eat. And they may be willing to say, just tell me what you can eat, and I'd be happy to make it for you, you know. Or create rules, like I'm not going to have any appetizers at this holiday party, you know, just dinner. Or I'm not going to have any alcohol until after dinner, or I'm only going to have one plate of food tonight without refilling. Even with the appetizer plates, when people spread those out all out on the counter, you're likely to go back, and you don't really see how much it is that you're eating. So I like to stay away from the cheeses and things that are you know, tough for me to stay away from, and just get a small appetizer plate and just say whatever I'm going to put on it right now is going to be good choices, and I'm just going to do that one plate. Also, keeping a food journal is so important, even with parties and holidays, because if you have to track actually everything that you eat, that is going to become cumbersome at a holiday or a party. So you want to make sure that you are really just keeping an idea of, oh my gosh, look at how much I have taken in, and maybe you'll encourage everybody to go for a walk after the dinner or whatever it might be. Refrigerate some leftovers immediately. So sometimes I've seen some appetizers, I just feel like there's no way I can eat all of these, but I feel inclined to want to eat all of them. So I'll just grab some things and put it on a plate and get some leftovers for later, and that way I can enjoy some today and some tomorrow. And then you want to also look at menu makeovers. You know, looking online, you can always find a lot of great low glycemic stuff, and you just have to be careful. Things that are low glycemic, even if they're processed flours or milled or whatever, are always going to have a higher GI, or you know, grains are always not going to be as good for you. Just because you're using Splenda instead of sugar doesn't mean that that's always a good idea. But being able to make over, you know, an entire Thanksgiving menu, we've done that before in my family to make sure that it is really healthy, or to be able to take a recipe and really say, you know, it doesn't even need that much sugar, or it doesn't need that much of this, or I could replace the oil with the applesauce, and different things like that you can really get into and talk to your coach about that to see which ways that you can really change a meal or a recipe or a menu to make it a little bit healthier. I know for me, I have 3 kids. Kids and family set me off track. I do feed my family the same food, and because TLS is family friendly at a young age or at an older age, you can really start to get your kids to transfer over eating the types of foods that you're eating with TLS. This is not something that they shouldn't be eating. This is something that everybody should be learning so that they avoid diabetes and weight issues and food addictions and all that in later life, and back pain and all sorts of things, headaches and bad sleeping habits, all the things that we experience because we didn't learn this, is really important that they get to learn at a young age. So really do your best to try to feed your family the same foods. At first you can just really expose it, or you try a 3-bite rule in our house, because it takes 15 times of trying something sometimes to develop a taste. So that goes for you, and I know that that's been true. I worked with somebody who didn't like Greek yogurt, you know, and it's okay if you don't ever eat Greek yogurt, but she really wanted, so she tried it for every day for 5 days. She said by the 5th day it's now a staple and I love it, and she learned how to doctor up a plain Greek yogurt so that she really did enjoy it. And we do the same thing with my kids. So there's some things maybe they'll never like, but now some of them are eating grilled veggies, and you know, a lot of them like avocado, you know, and they use it instead of butter sometimes, you know, when they're having an egg sandwich or whatever it might be. and also enlist their support. So getting your family involved in what your goals are and being a good role model is really important. Having a separate cabinet, maybe you have some kid-only food that, you know, on occasion you don't want to be the person who never lets them have some junk food or whatever, but everything in moderation. But maybe keeping that all in one area so you know that that's just an off-limits area for you. And engaging your family in exercise or activities so that you can really pull them on board would be great. Eating on the go is tough. You know, you have changes in your schedule. You've got a lot of things, you know, in your schedule. I feel like the TLS shakes are the lifesaver for me and for many of my clients because they have the right amount of protein and fiber to really keep you full and to make sure that you're not going to dip throughout the day. So I love them. And chocolate or vanilla, you know, my husband just left this morning using the vanilla shake. He puts berries in it, and he puts 2 handfuls of spinach. And he was a breakfast skipper before. So for him, that meal replacement of just, you know, he's not a morning person, but to get up, he exercises, he has his protein shake, he throws in the veggies and the fruit in there, and he's at least started his day on a really good foot. It can also help you just to have, you know, a little Ziploc bag of it or a little Tupperware container with a water bottle that you could mix anytime. So, you know, if you do get stuck in traffic or you are late at the office or whatever it might be, to have something that can prevent you from getting into that crash zone where you just get so hungry and you're so tired that at the end of the day you come home and you just start munching on things. So I also, if you are home, like to have cut veggies. I always grill extra food. So it's like if I'm going to grill chicken or steak or something, I grill anything I have to grill. I'll grill veggies. I'll grill extra chicken. I'll grill extra, you know, shrimp or whatever, salmon that I can, so that I know that it's going to carry me for 2 or 3 days to always have a really good protein right there. And then, you know, taking stuff with me in my purse other than the TLS shakes, like apples, tuna, almonds, things that can carry really tuna, means at any time I can have some protein with fiber. And isn't that what we're teaching? Protein and fiber at every meal makes losing weight. So it's really important to have stuff like that at the ready. For stress eating, you have to become aware of what you do. You know, with kids, that is, you know, or being overwhelmed and having too many things on my to-do list, whatever it may be. Even find throughout the school year when my children are coming off the bus, you know, the Axe, or we also have another product called Bliss, are really helpful because I do sort of feel that serotonin kick. I do feel relaxed but not tired, and when you're in that place, it's a little bit easier to stay on target with what your goals and your pre-planning is. But it's really important to make sure that you're also having competing behaviors that you set in place. So if you know that you sit down at the end of the night in front of the TV, and there's a ton of commercials at night about food, you know, and that's when you like to snack, then you have to come up with something that competes with that, like sit on an exercise ball and do some exercises instead, you know, or drink tea immediately when you are stressed out, or, you know, drink water immediately when you're stressed out or when you feel that urge come, so that you can offset it for 10, 15 minutes, you know, or make sure you have a healthy go-to snack. My husband started eating peppers and laughing cow cheese, you know, or celery and laughing cow cheese at the end of the night. He also prepackaged some of the nuts. So he likes to have nuts, but he'll bring a huge bag of pistachios or almonds into the living room, and I said, why don't you break them out and look at what an actual serving size is and put it in a little Ziploc container or put it in a little bowl and leave the bag in the kitchen. That way when your serving is done, you're done, you know, and having little things like that. But anything else that involves your hands or your brain is going to be competing to the actual eating. So having some things that are healthier options are certainly good, but if you want to change it altogether, you know, laundry, exercise, knitting, reading, journaling, talking on the phone, or even getting a support buddy in those moments to help you through it are really good ways. Chewing gum, brushing your teeth, you know, any of these things are not going to make you necessarily want the food at that moment, and most urges can pass after 10 minutes, so it's really important. But the supplements of Corn Acts, because they're helping to regulate things on a regular basis in terms of your serotonin levels and feeling satiated and keeping you on an even keel, are going to help from all those, you know, crazy dips and highs and lows that we get. So, you know, I love this. Wow, that's the biggest speed bump I've ever seen. The road to success is always going to have some speed bumps along the way, so you just need to make sure that you keep your goals at the forefront and that you know why you're doing this, and that's why you have a coach who's going to be there to help to keep you on track, to answer your questions, to make sure you know that you're doing the right thing. And we so appreciate your time in talking about dealing with detours today.